At midnight, the streetlight on Willow and 8th casts a shadow with no owner, and tonight someone steps too close. There's a streetlight on the corner of Willow and 8th. It flickers sometimes, casting long, shifting shadows on the cracked pavement. But every night, precisely at midnight, something strange happens. A shadow appears beneath the light, a tall, human-like silhouette, though there's no one there to cast it. Some say it's just an illusion, a trick of the failing bulb. Others, like old Mrs. Harper from the bakery, swear it's a ghost. She's lived in the neighborhood for 60 years. And according to her, that shadow has always been there, watching, waiting. Ethan didn't believe in ghost stories. He was a skeptic, the kind who rolled his eyes at urban legends. But one cold October night, after hearing the tale one too many times, curiosity got the best of him. As the clock struck midnight, Ethan stood across the street, hands buried in his jacket pockets. The shadow was there, just like everyone said, motionless, featureless, and utterly wrong. It wasn't cast by a tree, a pole, or even a passing figure. It simply existed. A chill ran down his spine. The air felt heavy, as if charged with something unseen. The sound of the wind seemed distant, muffled, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Ethan's heart pounded against his ribs, but he shook off the unease. Just a shadow, he muttered under his breath. But as he took a step forward, the streetlight flickered. The shadow moved. Ethan froze. He could have sworn it shifted ever so slightly, just enough to be noticeable. He glanced around. Nothing. The street was empty. No cars, no pedestrians. Just him and the unnatural darkness stretching across the pavement. His fingers curled into fists. It was probably his imagination, but the logical part of his mind offered no real explanation. Shadows didn't move on their own, and yet this one did. Swallowing his nerves, he pulled out his phone and switched on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the sidewalk, the pole, the streetlight above. But the shadow remained, unchanged, undisturbed. That's when he noticed something that made his breath catch. There was no distortion, no reflection. His own shadow, cast by the phone's light, should have overlapped with the dark figure beneath the streetlight. But it didn't. The shadow wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't being cast by anything at all. Ethan took another step closer, his pulse drumming in his ears. He was close enough now that the darkness seemed to ripple at the edges, like ink dissolving in water. It wasn't just a shadow. It was something else, something wrong. A whisper, soft, almost imperceptible. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Ethan spun around, his breath hitching. The street was empty, the silence stretching unnaturally long. Then, another whisper, closer this time. His skin prickled. His instincts screamed at him to leave, to turn and run. But his feet refused to move. His curiosity overpowered his fear. He reached a hand forward. The moment his fingertips grazed the darkness, a jolt ran through his body. The streetlight flickered violently. A gust of wind howled through the empty street. His vision blurred, his stomach lurched. And then, silence. The wind stopped. The flickering ceased. The night held its breath. The street was the same. The light, the pavement, the empty road. Everything was as it had been, except for one thing. Ethan was gone. The world was dark. Not the kind of darkness Ethan was used to, the kind where shadows stretched across alleyways or where streetlights flickered dimly. This was something else, something deeper. It felt like he was floating, yet he could still feel solid ground beneath his feet. The air was thick, pressing in from all sides, making it hard to breathe. He couldn't see his own hands, couldn't even tell if his eyes were open or shut. Then, slowly, the darkness began to shift. Shapes emerged from the void, twisting, stretching, morphing. At first, they were just vague outlines, but then they became clearer. Buildings, streets, streetlights, the exact same ones from his neighborhood. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It looked like Willow and 8th, but something was wrong. The air was unnaturally still. The houses lining the street were hollow, their windows gaping like empty eye sockets. There was no sound, no wind, no distant hum of traffic, just silence. He turned around, trying to make sense of where he was. The streetlight that had swallowed him stood behind him, still flickering weakly. But the shadow was gone. A chill ran down his spine. Had he somehow been transported to another place? Another version of his world? His fingers twitched as he reached for his phone. The screen remained black. No signal, no time display, just a lifeless rectangle in his palm. A sudden rustling sound made him snap his head up. It came from one of the houses. Ethan's pulse quickened. He wasn't alone. He took a cautious step forward, his footsteps eerily muffled against the pavement. The house in front of him was identical to Mrs. Harper's bakery, but the windows were shattered, the wooden sign above the door dangling by a single rusted chain. The rustling came again. "Hello?" Ethan's voice sounded small in the stillness. No answer. His gut told him to leave, to turn around and find another way out. But then he saw it. A shadow. Not like the one under the streetlight. This one moved. It flickered inside the house, stretching across the broken window, shifting as if something unseen was pacing back and forth. Ethan's throat tightened. Is someone there? He tried again, taking another step. The moment his foot touched the curb, the shadow stopped. A long pause. Then, the front door creaked open. Ethan's breath hitched. The door swung inward slowly, revealing nothing but darkness beyond the threshold. An invitation, or a warning. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his feet carried him forward instead. The silence felt heavier now, pressing against his skin. He stepped inside. The air inside was different, colder, thicker. Dust clung to every surface. The shelves that once held fresh bread were bare. The display case shattered. The place had been abandoned for years, yet it felt like someone, or something, was still there. A whisper. It was the same sound he'd heard before stepping into the shadow. But now it was clearer, closer. Ethan turned his head toward the sound, his heart hammering. The whisper wasn't coming from one place. It was all around him, seeping from the walls, the floors, the ceiling. Then, a voice. Low, hollow. You shouldn't be here. Ethan's breath hitched. The words didn't come from a person. They came from the darkness itself. He stumbled backward, his body tense. Who's there? Silence, then movement. A shape emerged from the back, of the bakery, a figure, tall and thin, its body shifting like smoke. Its face, it had no face, just smooth, featureless skin where eyes and a mouth should have been. Ethan's stomach clenched. Every nerve in his body screamed for him to run. But before he could react, the thing moved. Not like a person. It didn't walk. It flickered. One moment it was across the room. The next, it was right in front of him. Ethan gasped, stumbling backward. His back hit the counter. The figure tilted its head. Then it whispered again, "You shouldn't be here." The voice wasn't a threat. It was a statement, a warning. And then, the streetlight outside flickered. The world shifted. Ethan barely had time to react before the darkness swallowed him again. Darkness engulfed Ethan once more. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was something deeper, something that pressed against his skin like cold, invisible hands. His breath came in quick, shallow gasps as he tried to regain his bearings. Then, suddenly, a flicker of light. Ethan blinked as the world around him came back into focus. He was standing in the middle of the street again, right beneath the flickering streetlight. The bakery, the empty houses, the hollow silence, they were all gone. For a brief moment, relief flooded through him. "I'm back," he whispered, but something was wrong. The street looked the same, but there were small differences. The pavement had deep cracks that hadn't been there before. The houses appeared older, their walls covered in creeping ivy. The air smelled different, damp, stale, as if the place had been abandoned for years. Then he noticed the most chilling detail of all. The street was completely silent. No rustling leaves, no distant hum of cars, no night breeze. Ethan's stomach twisted. He reached for his phone, but when he pressed the power button, the screen remained black. No signal, no time display. Just like before, a movement caught his eye. His pulse quickened as he turned toward the sidewalk. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, but then he saw it clearly. His shadow. It stretched long and dark across the pavement, just like it should. Except it wasn't moving the way it should. Ethan took a slow step forward. His real shadow followed, but the other shadow, the one right beneath the streetlight, remained perfectly still. His throat tightened. Then it moved. Not naturally, not like a shadow should. It flickered, shifting unnaturally, as if it were alive. Ethan took another step back. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. The shadow began to stretch, its edges rippling like ink in water. And then it rose. Ethan stumbled backward, his breath catching in his throat. The shadow peeled itself off the ground, taking form. It grew taller, its shape becoming more defined. It was human-like but wrong, its limbs too thin, its movements unnaturally smooth. Then the whisper came again. "You shouldn't be here." Ethan spun around, searching for a way out. But no matter which way he turned, the street stretched endlessly in both directions. No cars, no people, no signs of life. Panic surged in his chest. "This isn't real," he whispered. "It's just a dream." The shadow figure took a step toward him. Ethan turned and ran. His feet pounded against the cracked pavement as he sprinted down the street. The air grew colder, sharper, making it hard to breathe. He didn't dare look back. Go back before the voices cut off abruptly. Ethan skidded to a stop, gasping for air. In front of him stood a mirror. It was massive, stretching from the ground up to at least 10 feet high, its glass surface smooth and flawless. There was nothing behind it, just endless darkness. But the reflection made his blood run cold. It wasn't just him standing there. Behind him, the shadow figure loomed, its faceless head tilted slightly, as if watching him with unseen eyes. Ethan's chest tightened. He turned his head slightly. Nothing. There was nothing behind him. But in the mirror, the shadow figure took a step forward. Ethan's reflection didn't move. A chill crawled down his spine. The figure in the mirror lifted an arm, long, impossibly thin fingers stretching toward Ethan's shoulder. He couldn't move. His body was frozen, his mind screaming at him to run. But the moment he tried to lift his foot, the mirror rippled. Like water, a hand burst through the glass. Ethan gasped, stumbling backward. The shadow's fingers barely missed him. But the mirror didn't shatter. Instead, the surface rippled again, as if the glass were liquid. The figure in the mirror took another step forward. Ethan had no choice. He turned and ran toward the only place he recognized, the flickering streetlight. The whispers returned louder, more urgent. The cold air clung to his skin, making every step feel heavier. The street seemed longer than before, stretching endlessly in front of him. But he kept running. Then, a hand grabbed his wrist. Ethan cried out, yanking his arm away. The grip was ice cold, like touching something that had never known warmth. He turned, expecting to see the shadow, but it wasn't there. Instead, standing beneath the streetlight was a man, or at least something that looked like one. His features were eerily smooth, his skin pale like wax. He wore a dark coat, his posture unnaturally still. But his eyes were completely black. "You need to leave," the man said, his voice low and urgent. Ethan's chest heaved. I don't know how." The man glanced behind Ethan. The mirror was still there, the shadow inside pressing against the surface like a trapped thing. "There's only one way," the man said, "but you have to trust me." Ethan swallowed hard. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, his fingers reaching toward the streetlight's flickering glow. The moment his hand touched the light, the entire street shook. The world around them rippled. Ethan's vision blurred. His knees buckled. The last thing he saw before everything went dark was the man smiling. Ethan's mind swam in darkness. For a moment, he wasn't sure if he was awake or still trapped in some nightmarish in-between. His body felt weightless, as if he were floating through empty space. But then, slowly, the world came back into focus. He was lying on solid ground. A dim, flickering glow pressed against his closed eyelids. His chest rose and fell in shaky breaths. Then he heard a voice. "You're lucky I found you." Ethan's eyes snapped open. He was back under the streetlight. The same cracked pavement. The same eerie silence. But the man from before was still there, standing over him with that unreadable expression. His black eyes reflected the weak glow above them. Ethan pushed himself upright, his muscles aching as if he'd been running for hours. Where am I? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying Ethan like a puzzle he was trying to solve. Then, finally, he spoke. You're caught between. Ethan's stomach twisted. Between what? The man exhaled slowly, as if choosing his words carefully. There are places in this world where reality is thinner, where the boundaries between here and there start to break. His dark eyes flickered toward the shadows stretching beneath the streetlight. This is one of them. Ethan swallowed hard. His skin prickled with unease. You mean I fell into some kind of other world? The man nodded. And that thing I saw. Ethan's voice caught in his throat. The memory of the shadow figure, its featureless face, its whispering voice. He shivered. It was real, wasn't it? The man's expression darkened. Real enough. Ethan clenched his hands into fists, his breathing unsteady. I need to get out of here. I need to go home. The man finally looked back at him. That's not so easy. Ethan's pulse quickened. What do you mean? There are rules to a place like this, the man said. You enter through the shadow, but getting out isn't as simple as stepping back through. He glanced toward the empty street. Once you've been seen, it's harder to leave. Ethan's blood ran cold. Seen? By what? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly lifted his hand and pointed. Ethan followed his gaze, and his breath caught in his throat. In the distance, just beyond the reach of the flickering streetlight, stood the shadow figure. It was still, silent, watching. Ethan's body tensed with fear. It followed me. They always do, the man said quietly. Ethan turned back to him, panic creeping into his voice. Then we have to run. We have to get out of here. The man's expression remained unreadable. There's nowhere to run. Ethan's chest tightened. Then how do I leave? He demanded. The man took a slow step forward, his long coat shifting with the movement. There's only one way. Ethan swallowed. What is it? The man's black eyes locked onto his. You have to face it. Ethan's stomach dropped. You mean you can't escape a shadow? The man said. But you can confront it. If you do, it may let you go. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. And if it doesn't? The man didn't answer. A cold dread settled in Ethan's chest. He turned his gaze back toward the figure in the distance. It hadn't moved, but he could feel its presence pressing against his skin like an unseen weight. His instincts screamed at him to run, but deep down, he knew the man was right. He couldn't run from something that wasn't bound by the same rules as him. Slowly, he took a step forward. The air grew heavier. The flickering streetlight dimmed, its glow shrinking as if the darkness itself were swallowing it. Another step. The shadow figure didn't move, but the whispering returned, low, distorted, curling through the air like an invisible fog. You don't belong here. Ethan's breath hitched, but he kept walking. You shouldn't have come. The figure loomed before him now, its form shifting like smoke caught in an unseen wind. The closer he got, the more unreal it seemed. Less a solid thing, more a hole in the fabric of reality itself. Ethan's hands trembled, but he forced himself to speak. Who? What are you? Silence. Then, in a voice that sent ice down his spine, it whispered. A reflection. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The whisper grew softer, a shadow of what was, of what could be. His mind raced. Was this thing part of him? A twisted version of himself? Or was it something else entirely? Something that fed on people like him? People who wandered too close to the edges of reality? Ethan clenched his fists. He had come too far to back down now. What do you want? The whisper swirled around him. To be seen. A sudden wave of cold washed over Ethan. The flickering streetlight above him sputtered, the shadows growing longer. The figure began to shift, its form becoming more defined, more solid. And then, for the first time, it took a step forward. Ethan's heart pounded, but he stood his ground. He had to. The shadow loomed over him now, its faceless head tilting slightly, as if studying him. The darkness around them thickened, the whispering growing softer. Then, in a voice barely above a breath, it whispered, "You can go." Ethan barely had time to react before the world collapsed. The streetlight flared brightly, and for a single blinding second, everything turned white. Then, silence, a ringing silence filled Ethan's ears. He felt weightless, as if he were floating in an endless void. His body ached, but he couldn't tell if he was standing, lying down, or simply suspended in nothingness. Then, just as suddenly as the light had swallowed him, he fell. The sensation of gravity returned, pulling him downward. Air rushed past his skin. A sharp jolt rattled his body as his feet hit solid ground. Ethan gasped, stumbling forward. His vision swam, his head pounding. Then he saw it. He was back. The streetlight above him flickered in its familiar, rhythmic way. The cracked pavement, the dimly lit street. Everything looked exactly as it had before. For a moment, he didn't dare move. He barely dared to breathe. Then he turned. The shadow beneath the streetlight was gone. Ethan's chest rose and fell in quick, unsteady breaths. He reached for his phone. This time, when he pressed the power button, the screen lit up. 47 a.m. A weak laugh escaped his lips. He had been gone for, what? A few minutes? Hours? It felt like days. The world around him was completely still. No whispers. No figures lurking in the darkness. Just the quiet hum of the night. But then, something shifted. A shadow moved at the edge of his vision. Ethan's muscles tensed. His pulse quickened. Slowly, cautiously, he turned his head. It was him. His own shadow, perfectly normal, perfectly ordinary. It stretched out behind him, cast by the flickering light above. For the first time since the nightmare began, Ethan let out a breath of relief. He was really back. The cold night air pressed against his skin as he took a slow step forward. Then another. Each step felt heavier, as if his body was still catching up with reality. But he didn't look back, not until he was halfway down the street. The streetlight still flickered. The night was still quiet. Everything seemed normal, except his shadow was longer than it should have been. Ethan froze. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Very, very slowly, he turned his head. His shadow stretched unnaturally far down the pavement, too far. And at the very end of it, there was a second pair of feet. His blood turned to ice. The whisper returned, soft as a breath against his ear. "You brought it back with you." Ethan didn't scream. He didn't run. He simply closed his eyes and stepped into the darkness.